Hi there, everybody. My name is Kurt Franklin. I am the Events and Webinars Manager here at Fulcrum. I wanted to say thanks, everybody, for joining us for this webinar today. Presenting is going to be Jake Freebald, our VP of Product Marketing. He's going to be speaking about the measuring the ROI of FieldTech, digital inspections and process management. And before we even get started, what I'd like to do is we're kind of curious what brought everybody here today. So I'm going to run a quick poll. And if we can get everyone to do an answer for it, I'm going to throw it up on the screen right now. While you're kind of taking a look at this and thinking about what you would like to answer, what brought you here today, I'll do a few quick housekeeping notes. First thing, this is an interactive presentation. So if you've got any kind of questions at all, please drop them in the question box. We will try to answer the questions at the end of the session. And if we do not get to your question, we will follow up with you with an answer. Also, there is a handout available that speaks to some of the ROI benefits of field data collection. Feel free to check that out. We will be doing a brief survey at the end of this as well, if you stick around right after the webinar is over. And yeah, so we are going to just take a few seconds here to let everybody get an answer in.
Looks like we've stabilized, Kurt, and it looks like about half of the people are interested in learning how to calculate ROI. About 2/3 are interested in learning what the sources of ROI are in field tech, and about 1/3 are interested in what we mean by field tech in the first place. So good responses, and hopefully that means we'll cover everything we need to in this presentation. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Yeah, so I will close the poll, and I will get out of the way, and Jake, take it away.
Super, thanks, Kurt. And thank you everyone for being here. We're going to talk about measuring the ROI of field tech today. I am Jake Freebald, VP of Product Marketing at Fulcrum. And I always like to start these things off with a goal. So the goal for today will be to see the sources of ROI, understand how to calculate the ROI of your field tech investments, and to communicate ROI to decision makers. To do that, we've got a couple of steps along the way. So you'll see the following structure to the presentation. We'll talk about definitions, ROI, payback period, which is similar to ROI, but I find is better in some circumstances for communicating the value of what you're doing, and field tech itself. I should define the term if I'm going to use it. Then we'll talk about finding the elements of ROI, the investments and the returns in field tech, including cost savings and business expansion. I'll show you an ROI calculator that I've been using to calculate some of this stuff out, and you'll see exactly how the calculations work. And by the way, you'll have an opportunity to make a copy of that ROI calculator for yourself here in just a little bit. And then finally, I'll wind up with talking about Fulcrum's role in achieving field tech ROI, how we help you achieve ROI in your field tech ecosystem. So with all of that in mind, let's first talk about calculating return on investment itself. That has a very specific meaning, and we're going to talk about what that meaning is. Now, the funny thing is that although I say it has a very specific meaning, if you go looking around the internet for definitions of what ROI is, you're going to find different things. And it's usually because the audience that the person is talking to is different for each of those different definitions. So for example, if you go to an investment site, frequently you'll see something that looks like this: the net return on your investment versus the cost of investment. And what's ironic about that, and might feel a little funny, is it sounds like you're defining a phrase by itself. You're really not, but that's what it feels like a little bit. And this is really focused on people who are, investing money like in stocks. That's where you'll see this kind of definition come up a lot. And it's not great for our purposes. Another one that I found is fairly commonly is the final value minus the initial value over the cost of investment. That also sounds a little funny because what's the final value? If we buy some technology, we buy, GPSs and iPads and some drones, what's the final value of that? And what's the initial value of it? Is it what I paid for it? Like, what does that actually mean? So I don't find that works terribly well either. We get a little closer when we see something like money gained minus money spent over the money you spent. That's actually much, much closer to it. But I don't love the idea about gaining money. What do we mean by that more precisely? So here's the definition that I'm going to use, and I recommend you use something similar to it. The calculation is finding out what the bottom line benefit is. So this can be cost savings, it can be additional revenue, it can be whatever it is that makes it to the bottom line, minus the amount that you spent on it, and divide that by the spend. multiply that by 100, so you get a percentage. That's your ROI. I'm going to take that definition and I'm going to put it up here in the upper right-hand corner, and then I'm going to give you an example to turn this kind of abstract thing into something a little bit more concrete. So let's say we spend $100,000 on new iPads, software, consulting, and training. And you'll notice that I'm throwing in everything I can think of that I'm spending on that project. I don't want to understate the amount that I'm spending, or else people won't trust my ROI calculations. So I want to think about all the different costs associated with this the venture that I'm embarking on here. And based on that $100,000, I expect to save $550,000 annually from reduced contractor hours. Don't worry yet about how I'm going to reduce those contractor hours. We'll talk more about that in a little bit, but just I expect to see $550,000 annually in reduced contractor hours. Cool. I'm also expecting $50,000 annually in reduced contact center calls. And here, just like I threw the kitchen sink in on the spend side, I want to throw the kitchen sink in on the savings side too. I'm going to say to myself, if I can get better customer satisfaction by having information on the phone of the person who is, or the iPad in this case, of the person who is out interacting with customers, that might reduce the number of calls I get into the contact center. Whatever it is, as long as it's a reasonable idea about how you might be able to reduce the amount of cost there, then go ahead and put it into your list. So my savings total then is $600,000. It's the 550 from the reduced contractor hours, 50,000 from the reduced contact center hours. If I plug that into my ROI calculation, that says that I'm going to save $600,000 minus the spend of $100,000. I put that over $100,000 multiplied by 100. So what is that? That's $500,000 divided by $100,000 times 100. Your ROI is 500%. So you can do that math yourself if you want to. Because this is focused on cost savings, and this is going to be really important organizationally, because this is focused on cost savings, I can interpret that by saying something like, for every dollar you gave me, I paid you back and saved $5 more. These are nice round numbers. If you calculate an ROI that says it's 394%, then you can say for every dollar you gave me, I paid you back and I saved you $3.94 more, whatever it may be. Now, I started with cost savings because a lot of organizations are focused on that as a primary concern. If you look at a municipality, if you look at a utility, the goal isn't to increase business or make more money. The goal is to reduce costs. Let's consider, though, a situation where we are looking at an organization that is maybe a service organization, goes out and serves power utilities, let's say. They spend that same $100,000 on new iPad software consulting and training, and they get $1.5 million in new annual revenue, right? This $100,000 that they spend is going to empower them to make more money because they'll be able to serve customers that they weren't able to serve before. Well, that's still a bottom line benefit, right? That increase in business is still a bottom line benefit. So in this case, our ROI calculation is going to be the $1,500K, right? $1.5 million. I'm just going to shave off those last 3 zeros and put K in there instead. And my 100K that I spent by 100%. So my ROI there is 1,400 divided by 100, or times 100%, or 1,400%, right? So it's a 1,400% ROI. Again, the way that you can think of this, because you are talking about increasing business rather than cost savings, is you can say, for every dollar you gave me, I paid you back and delivered $14 in new business, right? So it's a very easy way of that dollar value, in my mind, is a really easy way of thinking about what the impact is of the money that people are spending. And that's really what they want to understand. If they're doing an ROI calculation, they want to understand the impact of the money that they're spending. So for every dollar you gave me, I gave you $14 in new business. I'm just going to do one more because I want to make sure that this is that the process is pretty clear. Keeping it simple by keeping that spend steady, right? It's $100,000 on new iPads. In this case, we're both able to serve customers we couldn't serve before, and we're saving money on contractor hours and contact center hours, whatever it might be. So the savings and revenue, that's actually mislabeled, I just noticed. The savings and revenue together is the 1.5 million plus the $600,000. So it's actually $2.1 million that I'm either saving or gaining. And then I subtract away the 100K that I spent to get there. And that leaves me $2 million divided by 100K. $2 million divided by 100K is going to be equal to 20, and times 100% gives me a 2,000% ROI. So here again, the way that I can think of that is for every dollar you gave me, I paid you back and delivered $20 to the bottom line. One additional way of thinking about that, oops, sorry, I jumped ahead. One additional way of thinking about that comment about the money that you gave me and what I'm delivering back to you, you could also say something like, like for every dollar that you gave me, I was able to do 20 times $20 worth more using the same budget. That's another way of considering how to think about this. If you're focused on just spending your budget, you're not concerned about savings per se, but on spending your budget, that's another way to think about it. For every dollar you gave me, I was able to do 20 times more with that dollar than I would have been without this investment. All right, that was reasonably quick, I hope. If you have questions about this calculation, please do drop us a note in the questions. I will be getting those questions later on in the toward the end of the presentation. Now, that's a return on investment calculation. I've got my investment that I put in, I've got the returns that I'm getting out of it, and I'm able to see a percentage that helps me understand how I'm doing as far as delivering benefit from the money that people are investing. And that's a good thing. But there are some challenges with a return on investment. For example, thinking annually tends to be not great for a couple reasons. If you think annually and only annually, then people start saying, well, when am I, when am I going to actually see the benefits? Am I going to see it in year 2 or year 3? Like, what am I, how am I spending that money? And how is that money when it's coming in different from the money that I'm supposed to be getting back from this process, the return that I'm supposed to be getting back from this process? There are always going to be some kind of startup costs and startup time. And if you look at generating an ROI and you think, okay, well, I should be able to save myself, $1 million annually, then when does that year start? It's got to start after you've got enough in place to be able to execute the processes that are supposed to give you this return on investment, right? So, like the ROI, that return on investment might not start showing up for a year if you've got a year-long implementation process, or a month if you've got a month-long implementation process. So when do I start seeing that ROI? And we should be thinking about how badly a project has failed just because it failed to achieve its first-year ROI goals. Now, I'm going to say the project failed if it failed to achieve its goals, but that doesn't mean it's a complete failure, right? It may still have delivered an ROI where you were supposed to get a 500% ROI and you only got a 450% ROI. That's a failure, but it's not a bad failure. What's a reasonable return on the investment of the money within your organization? You need to understand that. Is anything above 0% okay because you're trying for some kind of additional benefit that may not be something that you can put into dollars? Maybe there's a certain customer segment that you can address that you weren't able to address before, or maybe customer satisfaction goes up or something along those lines. Is that okay that you're just not spending more money than you're getting out of it? I don't know. Are there contractual performance issues where if you don't hit a certain kind of ROI, that means that you're triggering some kind of issue with your vendors? I don't know that either. That's something that you have to decide within your organization and potentially on a project by project basis. In talking to CFOs, one of the things that I've found is that ROI is nice, but it's not what they really want to know. And because they really want to know something else, I'm going to talk about that other thing, which is payback period. The payback period comes from a mentality. In my opinion, it does anyway. It comes from a mentality. The CFO is looking at the pile of money that they have and are saying, this is constantly shrinking and I'm constantly trying to make the pile bigger. So you've just asked me to pay for a thing. I'm starting to pay for it now. And I have to pay for other things soon. That's going to, continue to take money away, and it might be money I don't have if I don't get paid back. So when do I start seeing some of that return on investment that you told me you were going to get? That really, to me, is the mentality that drives the idea behind a payback period. So if you can say to the CFO, by making this investment, we're going to have a startup period that's going to take about 2 months, And after those 2 months, we'll be able to you'll start seeing the return on investment, and the return on investment will be large enough that you'll be paid back within 2 months, or you'll be paid back within a year, or whatever that might be. So think about your bottom line impact 1 month at a time. Instead of saying, okay, my ROI is the whole year, think about it, okay, well, what does that translate into on a month-to-month basis? And then ask yourself, how many months will it take before you pay back your CFO? And always remember to keep in mind where that time period starts. So again, if there's a startup period, if you say, I'm spending the money today, but I won't actually be off the ground for 3 weeks or for 6 weeks or whatever, I need to keep that in mind as I talk about payback periods. And by the way, I say by month, you could do this by week, by quarter, by whatever divisions you guys are happy with, feel free to be happy with that. So this all sounds good, but I need to know how to do it, right? So I'm going to give you another example here that'll give us a concrete payback period. Let's say we're saving $600,000 annually based on the investments that we are making now. That $600,000 is annually is $50,000 a month, right? And I invested $100,000 all in on software, services, hardware, whatever it is that I'm spending it on. Well, I happen to know that 2 months of that savings, 50K, is times 2, is equal to the spend of 100K. Those two things are equal. And that tells me that the formula is, I'm going to take the $100,000 that I spend, and I'm going to divide it by the annual cost divided by the number of months. Like I said, you could do this quarterly. You could say, annual cost divided by number of quarters. That'll give you what quarterly payback you expect, or weeks, etc. But to keep it simple, $600,000 a year divided by the 12 months of the year means that I'm going to see a payback period in about 2 months. So if I abstract that out now and say, okay, well, so it's my general formula. My general formula is going to be that the payback period is the cost that I've got to spend in order to get what I want, divided by the annual benefit divided by the 12 months. That'll give me my payback period. Now I'm going to take that, and I'm also going to put it in the upper corner, even though I've only got a little bit left to show, because the payback period, again, needs to be thought about in terms of when everything starts. So what we see typically here at Fulcrum is, for example, we start a project, people are able to get certain kinds of benefits immediately by just creating apps quickly and doing inspections in the field, or having some kind of process management in the field. But in order to really see the payback that we expect to see, there's got to be some custom reporting written, maybe there's a report that needs to be done. So every time you inspect something, there's something that goes to a client, and that needs to be very specifically designed and laid out. So it takes a little bit to get those reports done, might take a week or two. There might be training on something. There's frequently not a lot of training that needs to be done with Fulcrum to get people off the ground, but there's training on multiple pieces. You might need to train your field staff on how to use a given app. You might need to train up the administrators of a given piece of software how to use it. You might need to train people on using a new sub-centimeter GPS or something like that. They just have to know how all that's done. After the training is done might be when your payback period starts, and so on. So always be realistic in your assessment of when the payback period starts. So I'm going to take that formula that we figured out before and add to it the number of months, in this case months, to complete onboarding, prep work, whatever it is, to get you off the ground and make sure that your benefits are actually being seen in the organization. That's really what you want your payback period to be to your CFO. If you beat that because some benefits are going to flow earlier, great. If you don't, at least you've told the truth about when exactly it is that you expect to see them starting to get paid back for the investments that you've made. And then finally, the third major definition I'd like to talk about today is FieldTech. I use this term. I use this term analogously to other kind of tech terms that get used within the world. Things like FinTech, which is financial services technology, or MarTech, which is marketing technology. I think there's the field is not being served as well as it needs to be in the software ecosystem and hardware to some extent ecosystem. And I think that when we talk about field tech, that helps us express what it is we want to express about what we should be doing to help ourselves. And let me make that concrete too. Every field-based team or every field-based organization has field team members that face significant problems as they go about trying to do their jobs. Over on the right-hand side, you see the kinds of things that these people are doing. They are performing inspections, maintenance, they might be involved in disaster response, et cetera, et cetera. These are critical, mission critical jobs that help keep infrastructure moving. They help expand infrastructure where necessary. They're critically important tasks that need to get done. But they are challenged in a variety of ways. First, by the difficulty that attends digitizing information and geospatial data capture. They're often using either paper maps, or they're using different applications on their phones or devices to capture that information. The digitization and geospatial data capture specifically is complicated. And one thing we've seen over and over again is that if it's hard for them to digitize this stuff, they will immediately revert back to paper. We've talked to customers and prospects who have discussed with us their implementation pains, and one of the pains is that if anybody, one of their biggest challenges is that people will revert to paper if they don't get this exactly right for the field. One of the ways that you can get things wrong for the field is by having multiple apps in a single workflow. You've got a field service management mobile app that tells you you're being dispatched, it's for this kind of a job, this is the trouble ticket, etc. And then you've got a different app that's that you use for managing inventory, and you've got a different app that's used for managing your maps. All of those different apps in a single workflow make things very complicated for that person out in the field. We know that the people out in the field have less supervision, which means they also have longer lag times between supervision, right? You've got somebody back at the office maybe who's responsible for multiple teams, and it's hard for that person to get out to be in the field with those teams themselves. That makes it really challenging for them to, for example, supervise a situation before the team leaves the site. And if they can't suggest rework or ask for something else to be checked out before the team leaves the site, then there's going to have to be a revisit. Another truck is going to have to roll, and we know how expensive that can be. So we have less supervision, we have long lag times on those teams. A lot of the work that those teams are doing is related to some of the highest risk in our organizations. You look at vegetation management and its relation to wildfires. Whether fair or not, the public will blame us for those things. So we want to make sure that we are showing definitely that we are doing everything necessary to prevent wildfires that are a result of vegetation touching power lines. But that's really hard to show, to demonstrate to people. It's hard to track all of the information necessary to prove that you were doing the right thing all along. Not just the kind of documentation that shows we were doing the right thing, but also legal compliance documentation is tough to capture. And finally, the data that we do capture tends to be slow, often especially if it's going to be on paper, but very often if it's locked up in different kinds of systems, it's tough to bring that information together and share it with people in a way that's going to be helpful in a timely way to do things like make better business decisions or to improve their processes. So every field team feels at least some of, if not all of, these issues every day, these business pains every day. And as a result, they have to create a field tech ecosystem. And this system, they go out and they buy data collection, they buy sensors and drones, et cetera. This ecosystem is stuff that we buy because we need to get hardware and software that is managed by us, by the field, for the field to solve field unique problems. We can't really count on IT to understand the field well enough to do that for us. We can't necessarily expect the people who own office-based systems to understand that our field problems well enough to solve those problems for us. Every field organization assembles a field tech ecosystem that's built by them, for them, and solves their problems. Now, by the way, I want to emphasize here too that I mentioned that we can't count on IT to understand us well enough to solve our problems, but we want to make sure we're working closely with them. And there's a lot of ways that having a good field tech ecosystem can help IT, but that's beyond the scope of today. I want to emphasize the fact that I'm not talking about trying to go against IT here. I'm just saying that you need to be able to solve your problems out in the field by building this field tech ecosystem out. The job requirements that you have, all the things that you see on the right, the inspections, the maintenance, disaster response, all of those things entail integrating field tech into standard processes, right? This has to be repeatable. And these repeatable processes will help you ensure that you've got appropriate rigor for any of the processes that you're engaged in, and that when you are engaged in those processes, you're collecting the evidence necessary to demonstrate that you've got high quality project completion. So whether you want to call that an inspection where you're doing quality control, coming in after the fact and seeing what people have done before, or whether you want to call that the process that you're engaged in, like vegetation management, you're applying herbicide and cutting, wielding a chainsaw, whatever that is, you're still collecting the data necessarily to demonstrate that you've done a good job there. I want to dwell just for a second on the fact that these job requirements entail integrating field tech into standard processes. It's not one thing, it's many. If there's one thing that I've seen that's really interesting over the past 5 years with Fulcrum, 4 years with Fulcrum, it's the fact that people come to us and say, okay, I want to collect data out here for this kind of inspection, but I really want to call a sensor that should have relevant information about the pressure in this pipe, or I want to take drone footage and put it into Fulcrum so that the person on the ground sees what the drone sees and understands why that drone thought that there was a broken insulator at that point. All of that information needs to come together so that the field tech ecosystem really is an ecosystem. It's working together to solve these problems and is not one single application to rule them all, as is so often the case in an office setting where you've got one application for finance, one application for manufacturing, one application for HR. The field isn't like that. That's why field tech is just inherently an ecosystem. So again, if you have any questions about field tech and what it means, please feel free to add those to the questions. What I'd like to do next is talk about, in the field tech ecosystem specifically, what are the elements of ROI? What are the returns? What are the investments? And I'm going to start by breaking down the elements of ROI. I'll start with tracking the investments themselves. We just talked about some of those. You can see those on the screen here. But the hardware, the software, and I'm going to break the services down into two separate sections. One of them is implementation services and the other is integration services. Now, when you're purchasing hardware and software, there's a hard dollar cost associated with that. When you're building something, you need to consider the costs associated with that as well. So for example, if you're comparing a homegrown system to an off-the-shelf system, then you still have to account for the fact that someone is assembling that hardware in your shop to make that all come together. If you just compare the cost of the pieces to the cost of a production hardware system, that's not really a fair comparison, because that person's time and effort, or people's time and effort, needs to go into building that out as well. Same with software. When we talk about implementation services or integration services, implementing a new hardware or software system or implementing a new process is always going to cost some time and money. But that's true, again, whether it's someone else doing it or whether it's you doing it. So I'm not asking you to break these out in terms of what you're paying to someone else versus what you're doing in-house. If you're considering ROI, you want to consider both sides of that coin, the hard dollars that you're putting out, as well as the hard dollars that you're paying to someone to do it in-house. It's a lot of words. Let's make an example out of this. We'll start with electrical pole inspections. There are a number of different pieces of hardware, software, and services that we could implement to get this off the ground. We'll start with drone video inspections and storage. You've got a drone that goes overhead. It uses cool AI technology to see if there are broken insulators or signs of problems on the transformers, et cetera, et cetera. And when you get that video, you need to not only do the analysis, have the AI go through and see what looks like there's a broken insulator, but you also need to store that for some length of time, because you need to have the record that you've done what you need to do. So there's drone video inspections and storage. Maybe you're buying that from a vendor. You need to have sensors that are going to detect transformer anomalies. Maybe that's a sensor that's installed at the pole itself. And when you install that sensor at the pole, it's able to make some measurements that are going to say this transformer might be malfunctioning. Only might be. Those things are not perfect either. Neither of the two things above are perfect. With Fulcrum, this is where we would come in. Typically, there's a field worker who's going to look at that drone video. Actually, probably won't look at that drone video. That drone video will be analyzed by someone else, and the field worker will be dispatched to say, go check out what's going on here. It looks like there's a broken insulator. Or there will be some other kind of process that worker needs to follow. There needs to be some quality control to make sure that that person is doing it correctly. And if there is an anomaly, for example, if that sensor detects a transformer anomaly, then the field worker needs to investigate the anomaly. I like to think of the drone situation as eyes in the sky. I like to think of the sensors just as the IoT. It's kind of the sensors on the ground, and Fulcrum is the boots on the ground. These are the people who are going out there to really to implement the decisions that need to be implemented. When Fulcrum is in play, often we've got trucks rolling, and we want to make those trucks rolling be as efficient as possible. Not only do we have to think about the individual costs associated with each of these things, but we want to ramp up. We need to consider that there's going to be ramp up costs. I need to be able to train people. I need to be able to implement whatever video system I've got. I need to be able to train teams on using the drones and using the AI inspection capability. I need to manage that implementation. And I need to integrate this stuff as well. Like we may need to get GIS information out of a GIS and bring it into the FieldTech ecosystem. I may need to be working with a field service management platform, which is all about dispatching trucks, but doesn't do as good of a job at understanding how the work is going to be done on the ground and what that field worker really needs as far as the intelligence in front of them to complete their jobs, or to how to QC the job that they're doing. They might only have simple checklists. They might not be able to do everything that needs to be done to provide the evidence that the team has done the right thing. So these ramp up costs are going to be they may be significant, they may not be, but the point is you have to think about them in your ROI calculations. And then finally, you need to think about any kind of external services you're going to use, whether these are professional services, managed services that go on a month-to-month basis, whatever it may be. You need to be thinking about any of those external services. I don't know if you noticed that, but I just switched the slide because I went from electrical pole inspections to, say, water pipeline inspections. And here you've got a very similar kind of scenario. There's a company called T4 Spatial that we've been working with at Brown and Caldwell, for example. They do video inspections, so that's the same thing as the drones in the electrical example. And here the sensors might be detecting water flow instead of detecting transformer anomalies. Same thing though. All of the same considerations that I just talked about on the electrical side are also requirements to consider on the water pipeline inspection side. Having talked about the investments and how much money we're spending on each of those things, we need to talk about cost reduction. How do we, and what kinds of costs are we actually reducing? And I've got a number of categories here, and I'm not going to go through them in a lot of detail. Couldn't do it otherwise sounds great because it feels like it's completely necessary that we have X, Y, or Z. I find it can be challenging when you try to communicate that to people, because especially if it's something new, if this is a new investment and you think you're not going to be able to scale otherwise, you're not going to be able to do X, Y, or Z otherwise, that's it. I just find that it's a hard sell. It's often better if you can show specifics around the remaining items or other categories of cost reduction that I might not even have listed here. Just to make those things more concrete. I couldn't do it otherwise. Okay, maybe I could do it otherwise, but it'd cost you 5 times what we're doing right now, or 10 times, or 100 times. Or I'd have to hire a small army of people to go out and do it, because otherwise we couldn't do it fast enough. So I need to have 100 times more people, whatever it may be. But if you look at the remaining cost reduction metrics, if you will, in-field efficiencies is one of those places where we see a really significant increase. Supervisory efficiency, I've already talked about a little bit, and documentation efficiency, because we're talking about data. If we can pull that data automatically into documentation instead of having to build it by hand, that makes a huge difference. And then I'll talk a little bit about rework avoidance here in a second too. Let's again take these kinds of abstract things and turn them into an example. And I'll use here for an example, vegetation management. Let's say you're using drones right now to have a crew go out, and where they would drive pretty much everywhere and walk in certain areas in order to see where there might be vegetation issues. They can survey a larger area by bringing drones out, using those drones over a much wider range. It reduces the amount of time it takes because they're not walking or driving. The drone is able to cover much more territory in a shorter period of time. That's a significant improvement on the drone survey side. But also remember how I talked about drones also being used to look for things like broken insulators? It's possible to have more than one thing done at a time by having your crews who are going out to look at vegetation management also provide footage that can be analyzed to look for other problems in the on your lines and poles. So the one thing to consider here is the cost reduction, not only of the drone surveys taking less time and being better, but also the cost reduction of not rolling another truck for a different purpose that could be accomplished using the same kind of system. As you're doing this vegetation management, you're catching information about where there were problems. Those locations can be inserted into Fulcrum or for further inspection. Remember that you won't always necessarily know definitely that there's a problem with a given area. You're going to get what looks to be a problem in a given area, or the AI will pick up some kind of anomaly, and it looks like it's an anomaly, but it might not be. You know, that arm might not actually be broken, or that insulator might not actually be broken. So there's again, you've got eyes in the sky with the drones. You want boots on the ground with Fulcrum. Being able to insert those locations directly into Fulcrum and then send people out to where they need to go in order to further inspect or trim will reduce the dependency on paper maps, which is an increase in efficiency, reduce the dependency on additional apps, which is an additional efficiency. And we've seen over and over again that the kind of apps that get created in Fulcrum also can improve the time it takes to do a given inspection, sometimes by 50%, sometimes by 30, sometimes by 80, but it's very often a very significant performance improvement just on that survey. One of the reasons for this, as you can see, is that very often when there's a process without Fulcrum, there's a GIS related, you've got a laptop that has the asset information or sometimes a book, then you perform the inspections, take your pictures, and then you have to synchronize that information and then finally reconcile it. It's actually a fairly complicated process. Whereas when you're using Fulcrum to execute the process, you basically know where the pole is, so you drive to the pole and then you perform the inspection, then you drive to the next pole. So so we're looking for that kind of improvement in performance at that stage of the game. In addition, supervisors, because they are able to see what's going on in the field, the field tech that you've assembled is enabling them to look at images, video, hear audio notes, whatever it may be, all in much closer to real time, means that they can see that result and investigate what's going on a little bit. And if they need the crew to go back and do some rework, they see something that's sloppy, they see something that requires better investigation, they can let that crew know before they leave the area. And if they can do that, then again, saves another truck from rolling. It keeps rework from happening. So supervisory capacity can be a huge benefit to your return on investment calculation, just by showing where the efficiency is that's gained in that. Automatically generated documentation I touched on before. This is all just data, so a computer should be able to roll it up instead of a person having to do it every time. And then finally, something we may not always think about very much because we're so used to not having it, is that field tech investments can give you hard data for your field leadership to analyze. That drone data with the AI doing an analysis of where your problems are can give them a sense of the percentage of poles that have issues with broken arms or with a broken insulator. Having the data coming in from Fulcrum saying, look at all of the places where we've done trimming, look, here's how long it took, here's the results we got out of it, and we can overlay that on top of places where there were fires sparked. That kind of thing gives them hard data that they may not have had before for field leadership to analyze, sorry. I've spent a bit of time, so I'm going to not go into detail on revenue positive effects, but those people out in the field right now, if they're doing inspections, maintenance, disaster response, et cetera, for another organization, and you are charging that organization to have your people do it, then there are a couple of different things that might happen. First, by implementing the right field tech, you might be able to increase your efficiency or your ability to serve in current use cases, right? So you do vegetation management for a living, you are able to, using field tech, serve 20% more customers because you're that much more efficient. That's a revenue increase. So there, you're not looking for cost savings. Yes, you could, reduce your workforce by 20%, but that's not what you want. You want to increase the amount of work you're doing, that's an uplift in current use cases. Another one is you could create new use cases where you were originally going to be doing one kind of work. You've been going out there and doing inspections just on the pumps at certain pumping stations. Now you are also able to do a quick cybersecurity check to make sure that the locks on the terminals are good, make sure that passwords have been changed. And you can do that because you now have new information in the hands of the person who's being sent out, and they're able to do more than they ever were able to do before. So you're able to not only do one use case, but you're actually expanding new use cases, and you can charge for those use cases. And then finally, you might find yourself entering new markets. One of the things that we saw with one of our clients was that they spent a great deal of energy assembling the information necessary on paper to go and serve their larger government clients. And therefore, they had to leave a lot of money on the table from smaller organizations. By using the right FieldTech ecosystem, which of course included Fulcrum, which is how I know about it, they were able to reduce the amount of effort it took to bring that stuff together. They had the data in their hands more easily, and they were able to then start serving much smaller customers than they were ever able to do before. So they actually entered an adjacent market just by assembling the right technical ecosystem and making sure that they could serve those people in the field. Those are a lot of things to keep track of, but I think that there are probably a lot of different elements that you can think of within your use case as well. What I'd like to do very briefly is show you how to use an ROI calculator. This is one that was developed here at Fulcrum. It's focused a bit on what Fulcrum does, but I think you will see how it gets used and how it could be applied to a lot of different situations. But I'll walk you through a simple use case, and that way we can see what it looks like, and you can understand some of the numbers that are coming out of it. All right, so this is what you should be seeing now, and Kurt will tell me if you're not, is a copy of an ROI calculator done in Google Sheets. And there are default values down here. I have a bunch of default values so that I never get some kind of junk up here. I never have a problem with the, you'll always see numbers. In other words, you won't see broken equations. Let's talk about a field data collection process. So think here about field inspections. Maybe in your current state, you've got, we'll just say 25 field inspectors. And we see numbers here ranging from 5 to 1,000 or more. And so this will probably only fit a small number of you, but the concept is what matters here. With Fulcrum, we want to keep it the same number, 25 data collectors. Now, how many activities? What I want to know, and I'm sorry, let me give you a little bit of context here first. I'm going to walk through the data collection process first. Just how many boots on the ground do I have doing the data collection out in the field? And then how many people do I have working on data management in the background? So right now, if I've got a paper-based process, maybe I've got people in the background transcribing paper into spreadsheets that then get loaded into a computer system. That's one way that works out. Another might be there are people who are taking spreadsheets off of laptops, collating those spreadsheets and putting those into another system. So there's a number of ways this could work out, but their bottom line is they're not the ones necessarily out in the field doing it, but they're doing work that's necessary in order to make the data valuable that you collect. And then reporting hours. How much am I spending on reporting, generally speaking, overall? And that'll include things like I've got an individual report for an individual inspection, or I need to aggregate a bunch of inspections into reports for a specific client and give them a roll-up of everything I've done for them. So your reporting hours, how much time am I spending on for those tasks? So those are 3 sets of costs: data collection processes, data management, and reporting. And we're going to look at how to understand the costs with, in the current state, and by adding Fulcrum, which is just one piece of FieldTech. I get that, but the concept is the same for anything within your FieldTech ecosystem. But that's just the costs of the processes that we're engaged in, right? We also need to consider the software and services costs, software services, and any other kinds of additional requirements we might have. We might be going from paper to Fulcrum in this case, and if that's true, then we probably need to add in costs for, one-time costs to say we're going to get everybody iPads or whatever it might be. So there's cost associated with moving to Fulcrum, and that's part of the cost that you're trying to do the return on investment evaluation on. And then I'll show you how the calculation works out with total ROI and payback. So that's what we're trying to do. I should have said that from the outset. So let me restart that for a second. Let's say we've got 25 data collectors. I anticipate still having 25 data collectors when we're all done here. The number of activities they're able to do per collector per week, let's just say that's 10 right now is the amount they've got. And the number of minutes that it takes to complete a data collection activity is going to be 30 minutes. Now, this could change depending on whether you are, is one thing next to another. You're doing this poll and then that poll and that poll, so it's really close together, and there's no drive time. That might be one thing that, way of looking at that, and that way the drive time can be considered just part of the inspection. In other cases, you're going to say, okay, well, I've got a 2-hour drive to get to the place, and then I do a 2-hour inspection, and then I have another 2 hours to get to the other place. Maybe you only want to consider the number of minutes that they're actually doing the inspection, and that won't affect the other work that's being done there. Let's say with Fulcrum, like I said, I've seen plenty of cases in our customer base where we're able to cut the time in about half, so I'm going to say it's about half, and I'm going to leave it as 10 data collection activities per collector per week. I've got a number in here for the average hourly cost. I'm going to let you fill that in. This is a default, and you'll see it. If you plug in your own number, then you'll get something that fits more likely with you. Is it $22 based on who's out in the field? Is it a more highly skilled engineering resource that's out there, so it's more like $80 an hour? Whatever that is, put that in there. Make sure when you do, always include the full burden, right? A person isn't a cost just according to their salary, but also according to their benefits package and all that stuff. You need to include that fully burdened cost for the data collectors in there. So if I can actually save the amount of time per activity that I say I can here, that I think I can here, and be conservative. Maybe we only want to make it, I can do it in 20 minutes. If I can save that amount of time, then I'm taking my costs from being almost $200,000 annually to being about $130,000 annually. Great. And then I can redirect those people to other tasks that need to get done. I can put them on other jobs that generate revenue. I can do more with those people. Let's say that's what I'm trying to do here. So I'm essentially saving $65,000 worth of budget to allow those people to do other things. Now let's say when people have been handing paper in back at the back office, there's somebody there who transcribes that stuff, and they've been putting in, it's, what are we saying, 10 inspections here for 25 people, so about 250 inspections a week. Let's say that they're doing about 10% of that. As far as hours, for each inspection, they're doing about 10% of that time. The inspection takes 30 minutes, so they're spending about 3 minutes each times 250. So 3 minutes. And if it's minutes, it's going to be 3 divided by 60. Sorry, I'm being a little cranky here, but 3 minutes times the 250 activities that I've got going on. It's about 13 hours of data management total. If I can reduce that completely down to 0, maybe I can't reduce it completely down to 0. Maybe I can reduce it down to 1 hour, where I'm only going in there to do data management when it looks like there's an error, right? So now instead of doing these transcriptions all the time, I can only look at places where I think there's an error. Well, if that's the case, then using whatever my hourly cost is by default here, I'm able to drop that cost from 16,000 to about 1,300. That's a significant cost savings. And then reporting, same kind of thing here. Maybe I'm doing 26 hours worth of reporting time. And with the I find that customer reporting doesn't go away. There are always new questions being asked and stuff like that. But the amount of reporting that I'm able to reduce down to is, let's say, 10 hours a week instead of 26 hours. So here again, we're going from 67 or 68,000 to about 26,000. So all told, my data collection process, my data management process, managing the data that's coming in, and my reporting hours cut me back from about 278 down to about 157. Now, I'm assuming paper here, and that's not always a good assumption. If you're not assuming paper, then there's things that you can do here to put in software that you're adding and the software that you're using now and stuff like that. I'm not going to go into that. Because I'm assuming paper here, I'm going to say that you probably don't have any Fulcrum in place now. So we're going to need to add Fulcrum licenses to this. So I'm going to say we're going to add maybe 30 users, 25 who are out in the field, 5 other people using it in the office. The plan, I'm going to just say $50. There are different price plans, just like I'm going with a reasonably high number here so that it's realistic. I'm going to say that there's a managed service cost. I'm going to say that you've got people on Fulcrum who are going to be, spending, let's call it $250 a month. This isn't a big site, so I'm going to say $250 a month there. And then there are one-time switching costs. I need to buy iPads for those 25 people, so there's like 25,000 initial investment. Seems like a fairly large number. But even with that fairly large number that you're investing up front, and realize, by the way, I just want to make this clear, these are annual numbers, right? I've got 30 users at a certain price point, and I'm paying a monthly cost. So these are recurring costs. This one down here, buying the iPads, that's a one-time cost. You can add in replacement and stuff like that up above as a percentage or something like that if you want. So my total software and services cost for year one with Fulcrum is $46,000. That takes us to from a current state where I'm spending $279,000 to $203,000. And that means that the cost savings, the hard dollar savings that you're getting versus the current state is about $7,600, $76,000, bit of a difference. That is a return on investment of 64%, and your payback period is 7 months. Now, there are a ton of things that can take place here that I've seen cause these numbers to be much higher. So for example, very often we see that the amount of reporting that's being done is much higher than this. You might see something more like 30 hours, and this gets cut down to, again, a smaller number. The reporting hours, sorry, I think I said reporting here, the data management transcription stuff. The reporting hours are frequently higher. Those can drop down. I'm just trying to give you something which is not a best case for Fulcrum so that you can see that even in a not great case for Fulcrum, you've got a significant amount of savings. Oh, and another thing that we frequently hear, I said $25,000 for new iPads. If you can cut that dollar figure in half, you'll see, again, a significant improvement in both your return on investment and your payback period. The graphs over here on the right show that. You can see here that years 2+ show a much higher return on investment because this one-time cost is not an issue, right? So you want to make sure you're thinking about not just year 1, but year 2, year 3, and so on. And if you can just walk through the process of understanding what your costs are, where you think your costs are going to shrink, then you can do a cost-based return on investment pretty quickly just by walking through these fields. I would note that in this spreadsheet, there's a savings-oriented one that is much more detailed. We can talk through that if you want to, obviously not today. And there's also one here that you can look at that is expansion-oriented. In other words, if you're trying to say, I want to not only, I don't want to just save money, I actually want to improve the business that I'm getting. There's a whole other section here about increased business opportunity and costs that you can also fill out to see what your ROI is going to be. And I say that you can fill out that and see what you want to do, because there is a version of this that Kurt is putting into the GoToWebinar interface right now. So you can actually take this spreadsheet, you can go to the file menu, say make a copy, and when you do that, it'll bring up your own personal copy of this spreadsheet, this whole set of items, and that will bring you to the, give you the same charts, the same graphs. You can make any kind of, play with it as much as you want to, and understand the ROI of your particular implementation. So that should be in your GoToWebinar interface as we speak. And with that, what I think I would like to do is come back and just briefly, I know I'm really running up on time. Sorry about that. I'm going to start talking about Fulcrum's role in achieving some FieldTech ROI. I talked about the right-hand side of the screen before, but there's a whole other world of other applications, the IT and digital transformation teams and so on that Fulcrum talks to. Fulcrum really is purpose-built for better field data and processes. And we focus on being industrial strength, right? In the field, we're trying to make sure that you've got something you can count on for any kind of situation you're in. We are geospatially focused, which is something that's so important for the field and so often gets overlooked. And we are focused on data collection and process management. We're that platform. We're going to help you harness the power of your field tech ecosystem, and we're going to bridge the gap to your enterprise. One of the things we get called on to do very frequently is help take the data that we've got in the field and apply it to other processes in engineering or operations or other scenarios, HR even, just tracking time people were working on things of that sort. We do that by standardizing processes in your field tech ecosystem. By using this single platform, you can transform your processes, your individual projects, and even your organizations to use consistent, rigorous processes that are also flexible enough to adapt to changing circumstances, changing clients, and changing situations. And we're able to capture and share all the field-related data across your entire organization, which gives you better dashboards, better reporting, better AI training sets, better data quality, better reliability, and ultimately, better decision-making. One of the things we have to be able to do in order to help you standardize on Fulcrum across your entire organization for all field process management and field data collection is adapt to any situation you've got. And so we focus very hard on making sure that that's super easy to do it in minutes or days, not weeks or months, and take those rigorous processes and adapt them quickly for changing circumstances. And there's a lot we can do to integrate code from enterprise assets and so on. And the bottom line is, because it's better for your field workers, because you can adapt it to every situation in a way that's better for your field workers, it's going to get better adoption. And then finally, as you can see, based on this conversation we've had so far, integration is critically important to make field data collection and field process management work. We pull in information from enterprise data to enhance inspections, and we push data back out to enhance the enterprise once the processes that we've been engaged in are done. We have been in the water and wastewater industry, power, environmental engineering, and a variety of other use cases for quite some time. And we have thousands of customers and tens of thousands of users across multiple continents. So we would be very happy to work with you on any of the projects that you may have going on in your organization as well. That's it. We still have a couple of minutes, but only a couple. Sorry about that. Kurt will be asking any questions we've got for a quick follow-up. If you do have questions later, you can visit us at fulcrummap.com. Any questions you plug into the interface right now, we can get to with our, we can direct those to the right people. So Kurt, go ahead and fire away on whatever questions we've got.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just go with the first one we got here. Is field tech a Fulcrum thing only, or is it something other people are also talking about?
So I use field tech as an analogy, as I said earlier in the presentation, to things like fintech or martech or edutech, right, for financial services, marketing, and education. So it is a term that is becoming current. It is a term that has, a pretty easy ring to it. Do I think there are analysts out there like Gartner or somebody like that talking about field tech? No, that's not happening. But it's also not a Fulcrum thing itself. We're not going to try to brand this and do a big campaign where we say, look, Fulcrum is field tech. Like, to me, that's nonsense anyway. What field tech is the ecosystem that you're building. That's field tech is a handy way of talking about that field-oriented ecosystem that is so important to getting the job done. And so we will be talking about field tech like I've talked about it today, because I think that field tech ecosystem is really critical to our clients, and we want to be an important part of it. But it's bigger than Fulcrum. It's just a general term to talk about technology that gets used in the field.
Gotcha. We got another one that just came in. Good afternoon. I've got a question. If I purchase one license, how many mobile devices can I connect to it?
If you're, I don't want to talk about pricing on the phone on the public broadcast. There are in our terms of service, it talks about having two devices per license. you might want to talk about the use case. There's a free trial that you can use at Fulcrum. It's a 30-day free trial. It might be best to go to fulcrumapp.com, sign up for a free trial, and see if it suits your purposes, and then we can start to see if that is if that helps you decide whether or not it's right for you.
That's awesome. We're right up here on the hour, Jake. So I think that's it. Thanks again for the presentation. Thanks everybody for sticking around and asking some questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to everything, but we will, right at the close of this, a little survey will pop up. If you could answer it, it'll help us a lot in figuring out what kind of content to do in the future. And I believe that is everything. So I just wanted to say thanks again. Thanks, Jake. Thanks everyone here, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.